Welcome to another This Week in Coworking discussion.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. I am Hector Kolonas, and today I'm joined by Eyal Lasker from Flexible AI. We're going to dig into a very interesting type of episode this week. We were both on very, very long flights twice last week as we flew over from the US via different places to Sydney, Australia for the Flexible Workspace Association's annual conference. Both Eyal and I spoke. But first up, before we get into what we learned, what we kind of discovered around the Australian ecosystem, all of that, Eyal, how were your flights?
Funny you say that. So first thing, long, right? It's like a 25-hour journey, which was, okay-ish. I came from Europe through Paris to Sydney. Must say that, the locals weren't impressed. They're like doing that probably twice or three times a year. And for them, it's not a thing, but I kind of was more spoiled, especially with my jet lag, which was, horrendous.
We were talking about both at the conference and a little bit earlier before we record how we had very different jet lag strategies. And I think you just were like, I'm going to figure it out. Like, I'll go. And I was like, I'm going to get ChatGPT to give me an option. I'm going to get Claude to give me an option. Then I'm going to get them to debate about which option is better. And then I'm going to get them to give me an itinerary and follow it through. It seemed to work for me. You were a little bit more jet lagged than I was. But I completely agree. Whenever people in Australia were like, oh, so you just flew in? They're like, yeah, we do that all the time. Because Australia is so far away from everything else, their travel times are completely different proportionally to what we think of as travel times, which is always funny because I always thought my family who lives in Europe, when they think they travel times are big, I'm like, you know nothing. We live in America. So much bigger travel times. Then we meet Australians and they're like, yeah, it's only a 14-hour flight. Like, it'll be fine.
Much respect to all the operators that are coming and attending the conferences in the US and Europe. It's amazing to see them taking the time and investing the energy, and it was good. I felt good about just kind of paying it back and coming there this time.
Absolutely. And we were both invited to go and speak. It was great to hear you speak on a panel. You talked about whether, the industry is dying without the right amount of data. Do you want to kind of break down a little bit about your panel and what you learned and shared with the group?
Yeah, so our discussion was primarily around data. What do we measure, right? And I think that's such a relevant question because we have these discussions in the US. Obviously, we have the same discussions in the UK with WIN and now in Australia. So what metrics should we track as an industry? And even more importantly, what metrics should we share, right, outside publicly, so that we can create those benchmarks, we can create a level of data that can be used and consumed by lenders, landlords, banks. So once we all speak the same language, right, I believe that will help kind of solve or open the bottleneck as it comes to the management agreements, the lease agreements. Like, how do we really expand and accelerate and scale to become, we have the 30%, 30. Let's first find the infrastructure or the system process to get there, solve really the core problem, and then I truly believe it's very achievable.
I completely agree, and it was a fantastic session. Obviously, the main challenges that keep coming up, and as you said, it's happening all around the world, is the taxonomy and terminology, right? How do we call the things the same things? And then how do we use numbers to explain what we do to the capital markets, to the rest of the industry who are investing in similar types of asset classes, like student accommodation, like short-term rentals, like self-storage, but they have figured out how to tell their numbers in a way that the capital markets understand, and we have not yet gotten to that benchmarking layer or that data sharing level. So it was fantastic to hear that. But you bring up a very, very interesting point, and that is the same conversations were happening in 3 different continents at the same time. Some are a little bit ahead of others, but everyone thinks that everyone else has already figured it out. And that's one of the biggest take-homes I learned from the conference, is how they're always looking at the UK, they're looking at the rest of APAC, they're looking at the US. They're like, everyone else has it figured out. What are they doing? And yet, when I speak to folks here, they're also looking back at APAC and being like, what are they doing there? So it's really interesting. Did you pick up on that as well?
100%. I had conversations and questions around like how do you do the different things back home or like in the US, and for the most part, right? I think that there's not much different or much difference. Even visited, I think 10 or 12 different locations, different operators, all in the Sydney CBD market. And one thing I will say, the user, like my experience or like the user experience from like a flex consumer was that was different. And actually, I was surprised how good it was.
Yeah, I was also blown away by like the quality of the product. I don't know if you also kind of felt that everything felt a lot more polished, but also, yeah, that customer experience, that greeting with a smile, the barista on service, the way that the spaces were designed with these very interesting and intricate staircases to connect separate floors, and the way that they were designed on purpose to make everyone share one kitchen. It was a very, very interesting product mix, but all very, very polished. And that's another thing that I also took away. I was like, how is like is everything of this quality? And of course, you have the different niches, just like in every market. You have like the Watsos, which are like the more suburban. I did manage to get to some of those, and they are fantastic, and they're also polished in their own way, right? They are very much the economy entry into the market, but still service-wise, technology-wise, all the things that really matter up to a really polished degree. At least that's what I saw around the 12 to 15 locations I visited as well.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking about my street to office journey, right? And let me share that with you. So first, Sydney CBD, it's all like premium or Class A buildings, like kind of the downtown area. You walk into the building, right? The first thing that caught my eye is that the revolving doors actually spin clockwise. So it's like
You actually noticed that good spot.
it's like the same way the water is kind of going down the sink, and so that was the first observation. Like, okay, interesting. And then the other thing is that there's no security, unlike the ground floor, right? Like premium buildings, amazing properties, but you just walk in and you press the floor at the elevator and you're there, right? So much less friction, whereas as it comes to like downtown, business area. So interesting. I don't know if they will pick up or like will follow, or sometime will decide to that they need to add the building security, but you didn't need like to check in your or to show your ID and get this like a badge or a QR code. Nothing of that. Did you have the same
Yeah,
experience?
you're absolutely right. Like I'm thinking back now, like I didn't have to look at my name on any single piece of paper, which is a very big thing still in Manhattan. Like how many times you have to be found on a piece of paper. Never showed my ID once, went straight into the buildings. One thing I did notice is that there's normally some sort of like activation, especially on the big buildings in the CBD. There's like an activation, a coffee shop or cafe on the ground floor, and the mezzanine is almost always some sort of FMD offering, which I thought was just a fantastic way to activate these CBD buildings. Whereas you've got this huge footfall. But yeah, I noticed that as well.
No, 100%. And I think, this is like by design, right? I mean, it's a problem that many landlords are trying to solve here in the US, right? Like, how do I activate my lobby space, right? So, to your point, F&B, barista, there's always something there, very easy to access, easy to get also like to some like, like an outdoor space or garden, things of that nature. So you just get more natural light, everything flows better. And then you get to the space, you're just like getting to this like very nice, well-designed, well thought out, great, greetings, right? And as you come in, someone will say hello. Sometimes we'll even like invite you to free coffee. I mean, fantastic.
It's very, very interesting. I'm glad you brought up the coffee again because I definitely had way too many piccolos, which is just basically the cortado in Australia. Fantastic coffees. I had way too many of them, but did you notice how many coffee shops there are in Sydney? I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on the flight back. It's something like 1,200 coffee shops in Sydney CBD, and 82% of them are indie or individual brands. And that like blew my mind firstly, but secondly, with so much coffee, You get into the co-working space and they also have baristas. So coffee culture is very, very big there, but even with so much choice, you can still get great coffee in the co-working space. So I wonder if it's not that it's a non-negotiable. It's like it's expected if you are going to an office that there is great coffee there as well, which is just like something I noticed as well, sort of like the revolving doors.
So just like everything like or what I described here, right, kind of connects to what we at FlexSpace AI are known for, which is the on-demand e-commerce platform, right? When you have such a frictionless way to enter the space, enter the building, walk up, and just start working, day passes, meeting rooms, everything that you can kind of book on the hourly, daily time frame. It's just like when you lower the barrier to entry, then it makes much more sense to open the doors for that type of use case.
Yep. I mean, it's definitely a position I had with many of the operators because, of course, I did a bit of like a solo tour just like you did. But I really love to go and just ask about how the technology works. Like, how does all the pieces work and what are they using? And there is a lot of interest in obviously on demand, instantly bookable space. There is a lot of demand for VO. On that topic, though, I also did visit one space. I'm not sure if you got to visit it, which was completely unstaffed. Did you visit that space? It was in at 14 Martin Place. I'm trying to remember the name of the space. They have a few
Interesting.
locations.
No, I saw a few locations around that, but no.
And so it was very, very interesting. 'Cause I walked in expecting what we'd see at every other space, right? Friendly front door, friendly person upstairs. This is where you go. This is where you meet. But I walked in and it was very much a kind of workspace, co-working space, but there was no one there. But by kind of arriving, it kind of notifies who you're there to visit, and then there's just no staff. And so I was thinking about you guys a lot when I was visiting that space because what a dream, right? Not only can people just walk in, but they can monetize those walk-ins because there's no one there, which is something we've seen starting to happen here in the US. And we have some in Brooklyn like that, where they're starting to play with this idea of completely lightly staffed co-working spaces. So seeing that at a little bit bigger scale was also really interesting and something I think a lot of operators are going to start looking into.
What do you think about it from like the experience side, but also from the business side? I mean, overall, do you think this is a trend that we will be seeing more and more, or is it just
I think it's going to become a part of the ecosystem, right? I don't think it's going to be a sub product. I don't think it can be called a co-working space. Let's not get into the full taxonomy and terminology debate. But if you are in the city, for example, and you wanted somewhere from your app, so you just hop in to record a podcast or make a quick call or just check in, and you don't need that full service, and it's basically a monetized amenity. It's a commodity at that point. I can totally see where that fits. Or if you're a company who doesn't really bring people to your office, maybe you're a software vendor or you're someone who goes to your clients a lot more than they come to you, I can totally see that there's a place for that kind of product. Low frills, maybe more cost effective in the CBD. But I definitely got spoiled on the kind of more premium polished side where I was like, I can only imagine coming in I'm going to talk about like the actual products, right? There is the normal co-working, but there's also these beautiful lounges. We've seen a lot of great lounges here in the US, in New York, you can see them, but like I was blown away by the quality of the lounges. Also, they were kind of designed a lot like coffee shops / libraries. Many of my meetings were in these places surrounded by other people, and it was so private, it was so clean, it was so professional that I was like, this is a very interesting twist on the lounge, which is normally a sofa somewhere or, an area where you kind of immediately feel that people are kind of watching you.
Yeah, even the space, the lounge that, for your breakfast talk, right? That was like the first day, I think, or just before the conference. Stunning space.
Yeah. That was at GPT and Space and Code by GPT, right? Fantastic space. And you're absolutely right. But I found a lot of spaces like that. Did you visit the WeWork at One Sussex?
No, I didn't make it.
So that was like one of their new flagships in the Barangaroo area. Hats up to that team for showing me around that. But you walk in, it's just beautiful open space, huge like picnic tables, but beautifully designed, a lot of kind of communal space, a lot of people in the communal space, which, as you know, in many co-working spaces here, people struggle to get people to come down to the kitchens and kind of hang out.
Yeah.
One of the spaces I saw a massive jigsaw puzzle, maybe 6,000 pieces being done on one of these massive tables that people would just come past randomly throughout the day and do that jigsaw puzzle. But I also wanted to also bring it back to Sydney is a very tall city, right? A lot of skyscrapers, a lot of co-working spaces, 30 floors and above, fantastic views. Now, obviously, I am a tourist. I was a tourist, so I took in those views and I was like, what a gorgeous view to see every day. A lot of those floors and co-working, like the day pass areas, were enjoying those views as well. It wasn't kind of hidden away with no light or anything like that. And one of the ones that really blew my mind with the view was the new Servcorp in Sydney CBD. I'm not sure how much people know about Servcorp. They do not do much press. They don't do much publicity, have been in the flex space industry for, I want to say 40 plus years, and are normally kind of just overlooked as like this old school stuff. I walked into their new building. Once again, the friendly staff, baristas, all of that, fantastic views up on the 30th floor. And I was just blown away by the polish, but they also had like an ongoing Monopoly game branded by Servcorp that was being played in one of the like breakout areas. So it was great to see that.
What do you think really enables that?
Oh, you mean the views or the fact that?
The level of design and the investment in the space.
Great question. I did ask a few operators about this, and it all comes down to how the landlord contracts were structured. So the big boom in Australia, from what I recall, and please, Australians, correct me if I am wrong, but from what I understood is about 8 to 10 years ago is when all the big initial co-working contracts were signed. There was like a scramble to get the best operators, to get the best properties, and a lot of the fit out was A, covered by the landlord, and B, was part of the regeneration of the CBD. So the Barangaroo area down there on 1 Sussex, where all those kind of cool curvy towers, that's kind of a new development. I think it's like 15 years old. So kind of all been redeveloped. And so all these landlords wanted to pull in great operators, but that also means that in the next 2-ish years, all of those leases come up for renewal. And so we're going to see Australia at a bit, at least Sydney, at a bit of an inflection point to see, are they going to move? Are they going to close locations? Are they going to kind of step up and get reinvestment? So it's going to be a very interesting 2 years from what I heard. But just to answer your question, I think the landlords are the ones that fronted that bill initially.
First thing, or like taking over the spaces and deciding that they want to operate it
Or that.
themselves. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we did have a landlord panel at the conference where 3 different landlords, one who already spun out, and that was the host, the GPT Space & Co., who already had their own flex brand. There was another who had their own flex space, but they also hosted other operators. But there is still an inherent risk, right? We're seeing it in a lot of other territories. I think it's on top of the mind for a lot of operators as well, is have they lost the leverage? And if they've lost the leverage, then can they improve their tech stack to make them more, to give them more leverage when it comes to the landlord? Because the landlord would have to start from zero, right? They'd have to build a new tech stack. They'd need to hire. They need to figure all that out. So I'm seeing a lot of discussions by operators trying to figure out, how do I build the best modular stack so that this becomes part of our offering to the landlord, part of our leverage and negotiations, and part of the package that we bring to any building or keep in any building that we're in.
I'm not kind of switching our roles here, but just another question that I have for you. So what learnings do you think we can import into the US market?
Oh, it's a very, very good one. The one is, I know a lot of REITs are watching WOTSO. So the real estate investment trusts, they are trying to figure out how they get into flex, because it's an asset type that not any big REITs are in the US. So they're watching WOTSO, who is a publicly listed investment trust in Australia, to see how they're taking the shift from taking over distressed properties to purely being a flex-based brand. I think we're going to see more of that polish coming through, especially as more Australian leaders come and speak about the bad basics that they need to do in their market. I think we're going to see that leveling up a little bit. And I think there is one underlying trend that I'm seeing, and that is the Australian operators are taking over more services for the entire building. And I think that is something that a lot of American firms are still trying to grapple with to figure out how do you negotiate those deals? How do you structure it in a way that, the Mosaic building by JLL Flex, it is one level of co-working. The rest of the building, the amenity spaces, the door access, everything is managed by the co-working Flex team, but they then share the revenue for the rest of the building with the landlord. So very interesting deal structures that I think we're going to see more of, especially over the next 2-ish years, where the structure of the deals in Australia will shift towards that more operational heavy model compared to what we were before, it was just rent arbitrage.
Yeah, that reminds me of the CBRE Industrious acquisition,
Exactly.
right? Like similar lines, right? Similar strategy, bringing in Industrious to activate the lobby, the amenity spaces, like thinking about the whole building experience.
Yeah, it's definitely down the same line. I think it was them kind of seeing the writing on the wall before anyone else kind of noticed. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Before we jump out, Eyal, what was the one thing that you took away from Australia that you're like, hey, this is awesome. We should bring this back with us as well?
A tricky question, Hector, because whatever I'll say, it's like saying something bad on the operators here.
I think it's very, very fascinating because, as we said at the top of this episode, right, there's a lot of what is everyone else doing? Like everyone thinks
Yeah.
every other market has it figured out.
Yeah.
But I do think like there are elements that we overlook because we're chasing, especially in the US, we're chasing metrics, we're chasing scale. Just to kind of recap, the Australia market is not a very large market operator wise, right? And yet many of the operators I spoke to either have 10 locations or are scaling past 10 locations in the next couple of years. And so it's a very different type of scale that we're seeing there. And it's just very interesting to speak to them about how they're planning that.
I thought about it. One thing, and we touched on that, but truly, one thing that I felt is being executed like across the locations or like really like perfecting it is the hospitality. We talk a lot about hospitality, and it was 10 out of 10 really. Every location, every space that I visited, it's almost like because I was thinking like looking at the design and where is like the community team is kind of where they're sitting or what's kind of the front desk experience. It's almost like you don't see it, but they're there and they're like kind of in a very subtle but thoughtful way know how to approach, welcome you, and really give you that great hospitality experience.
Absolutely. I definitely want to figure out how we can manage the jet lag better so we can go back and learn more. But I am super delighted to have heard from many of the people that we met, that many of them will be coming over to the US, going to the UK, going down to Juicy Africa to really share. So I look forward to learning more from them as well. Eyal, thank you for summarizing this trip with me. It was fantastic traveling there kind of with you and doing the conference with you and having dinner and all the fun things that FlexSpace put on. Any last remarks before we jump out?
Let's just keep pushing the boundaries. I think, we have like a tremendous opportunity as an industry, and what's coming very apparent is that our community is becoming global, and that's truly exciting.
Absolutely couldn't have said about it myself, Eyal. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.